headlines. U.S. President Barack Obama says he's launching a systematic campaign of airstrikes against the Islamic State in Iraq as well as in Syria. The Korean government announces its first cigarette price hike in 10 years. It's proposing an 80% markup to curb the country's high smoking rate. And political parties in Korea still see no progress in their wrangling over the so-called ferry bill, only mounting public pressure to finish negotiations and get back to work. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the newscast. Live from Seoul, I am Kang Chery. U.S. President Barack Obama has laid out his strategy on stamping out the growing threat of Islamic State militants in Syria and Iraq. Our Shin Se-min gives us the key points of his address and the details of Washington's plans to send more U.S. military personnel to that region.
Our objective is clear. We will degrade and ultimately destroy ISIL through a comprehensive and sustained counterterrorism strategy.
In a 15-minute televised speech, U.S. President Barack Obama laid out his plan to destroy the militant group that calls itself the Islamic State. His plan includes both military and diplomatic efforts. On the military front, Obama said an additional 475 U.S. troops would be sent to Iraq to support forces there. The U.S. president, however, also emphasized to the war-weary American public that those being dispatched were not combat troops. On the diplomatic front, Obama said he would be forming what he called a broad coalition of at least 40 nations to confront the militant threat by launching airstrikes on strategic targets and assisting the Iraqi government. Although President Obama said there was no indication that the Islamic State poses an imminent threat in the United States, he did not rule out the possibility of there being an attack on U.S. interests overseas. In his speech, Obama was unequivocal and strong in his language, in stark comparison to last month when he said that the U.S. didn't have a strategy for dealing with the militants.
We will hunt down terrorists who threaten our country wherever they are. That means I will not hesitate to take action against ISIL in Syria as well as Iraq. If you threaten America, you will find no safe haven.
President Obama called on the U.S. Congress to back his moves and approve the release of resources to train and equip local forces for their fight. Ahead of the speech on Wednesday, President Obama spoke to Saudi Arabian King Abdullah by phone to garner support. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
And while President Obama was speaking in Washington, his top diplomat was in the Middle East, drumming up support for the U.S. plan to confront the Islamic State. Our Park Ji-won has more.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry visited Baghdad on Wednesday, a matter of days after Iraq's new Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi was sworn in. Meeting with the new Iraqi leader, Kerry vowed U.S. support for the new government's battle against Islamic State militants.
We're prepared to take, not only with respect to ISIL, which is critical, and your own military's commitment to reconstituting itself and to being prepared to take the fight to ISIL, but also your commitment to the broad reforms that are necessary in Iraq.
Kerry stressed that IS is a vicious terrorist organization, and the U.S. and many other countries will help counter the threat posed by the group.
There is literally no place for their barbarity in the modern world. This is a fight that the Iraqi people must win, but it's also a fight that the rest of the world needs to win with them. And it's a fight the United States and the rest of the world need to support every single step of the way.
As Kerry was meeting high-level officials Wednesday, 3 car bombs exploded in eastern Baghdad, killing about 17 people and injuring dozens of others. Meanwhile, Russia's state news agency RIA Novosti reported of a possible nuclear threat by the IS militants. The news agency quoted comments by Andrei Novikov, the head of the Commonwealth of Independent States Anti-Terrorism Center, that suggested IS might have a nuclear capability. He said the terror group declared its intent to use nuclear weapons in June, and about 40 kilograms of uranium compounds had been stolen by insurgents from Mosul University in Iraq in July. However, atomic experts at the UN do not consider it to be a major threat, stressing that it would take years for IS to develop nuclear weapons. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Korea's high smoking rate has long been blamed on the low price of cigarettes here in Korea. But that's about to change. The Korean government has announced its first cigarette price hike in 10 years. Hwang Jae has the details.
In just a couple of months, smokers in Korea may have to pay almost double what they currently do for a pack of cigarettes. While the change is being welcomed by many, it's also facing strong opposition.
I think the price hike could lessen the damage of secondhand smoke, since many of my friends say they will quit smoking if cigarette prices go up. People will reconsider buying cigarettes if they're more expensive.
When we raise cigarette prices to a level on par with other countries, we should also look at the welfare level of those countries as well. But the government's logic is way too simple, that smokers will quit smoking if tobacco prices rise.
The government announced Thursday that it will push through plans to raise the price of a pack by 2,000 won to 4,500 won, or roughly $4.30 starting next year. The aim is to cut the country's high smoking rate. Around 44% of adult males currently smoke, which is the highest among OECD member countries. Cigarette prices in Korea, however, are among the cheapest in the world, standing at just around one-third the OECD average. The price has been held steady for 10 years, but the health minister says the time for change is now.
We plan to introduce a pricing system where cigarette prices will be pegged to the nation's inflation rate. We hope this proves effective in dropping the smoking rate over the long term.
The ministry's goal is to cut the smoking rate for men to 29% by 2020. Other anti-smoking measures laid out by the government include mandatory warning images on cigarette packaging and banning retailers from posting any kind of cigarette advertisement. Before any changes take effect, they will have to be approved by the National Assembly, and with both ruling and opposition parties raising concerns that the measures will burden smokers in the low-income bracket, passage is far from a certainty right now. Hwang Jae, Arirang News.
And what's also uncertain is whether the National Assembly will have broken through their deadlock by the time that bill is submitted. Lawmakers are still trying to work through their differences over the so-called ferry bill as pressure from the public to reach common ground is growing. Our Choi-Yoo-sun has this report.
With neither side able to stand further public criticism over the months-long political standoff stemming from a bill to probe April's ferry disaster, the floor leaders from the ruling and opposition parties resumed talks Thursday to try iron out their differences. The ruling party wanted the opposition to clearly state its position on the previous bipartisan agreement on the bill, which the opposition now says should be renegotiated with the ferry victim families. The families are demanding a stronger voice in the investigation process, but the ruling party says that would violate the judicial system. Urging the opposition to cooperate in swiftly passing a number of economic and reform-related bills, the ruling party also wants the parliamentary speaker to intervene.
As the National Assembly law states, we ask the parliamentary speaker to exercise his authority to vote on those bills.
The opposition, for its part, continues to pressure the ruling side to first address the ferry bill.
The president, the presidential office, and the ruling party must resolve the Seoul ferry bill without giving further thought. The bill to find the truth behind the ferry disaster is one that concerns all Korean people.
In a move to get parliamentary business back in order, National Assembly Speaker Chung Ui-hwa will request the House Steering Committee on Friday to set an agenda for the current regular session. The floor leaders on Friday, or by the weekend at the latest, will give it another try to reach a compromise. Choi-Yoo-sun, Arirang News.
And in a related development, the opposition floor leader Park Young-sun, who has been heading the party's emergency committee since its co-leader stepped down in July, says her party will recruit someone from outside to lead this committee to carry out vast reforms for the party, and it remains unclear at this point whether she will remain as the committee's co-chair. And in other news, President Park Geun-hye is set to embark on a week-long trip that will take her to Canada as well as the United Nations next Saturday, September 20th. For the first time since taking office last year, President Park will address the UN General Assembly, where she's expected to lay out her plan to restore peace and stability in Northeast Asia. The president will also attend the UN Climate Summit in New York and outline Korea's plan to tackle climate change. In Canada, President Park will focus on bolstering economic ties on the heels of Seoul and Ottawa's recently signed free trade agreement. This is the first time in 15 years that a Korean leader is making a state visit to Ottawa, and follows Canadian Prime Minister Stephen Harper's visit to Seoul earlier in March. With the Asian Games set to kick off in Incheon in just over a week's time, some North Korean delegates are beginning to arrive. The first batch of 94 members touched down at South Korea's Incheon International Airport this Thursday evening. This group included North Korea's Olympic Committee chief Chang Soo-myung, as well as its football and rowing teams. The remainder of its delegation will continue to arrive throughout next week before the start of this event next Friday.
For the latest in news that impacts Korea and the world, join Kang Chery for a lively half hour that covers politics, business, international news, and much more. Live at 8 every weeknight on Arirang TV.
Human Rights Council headquarters in Geneva on Thursday, finding ways to persuade. It's been just over a month since the Korean government eased regulations aimed at boosting Korea's listless housing market, but there are already growing concerns that this move will place a greater burden on the domestic economy, as the increase in household debt more than tripled last month. Kim Ji-yeon reports.
Household debt rose sharply in August, raising concerns that it's spiraling out of control. Housing loans jumped more than $4.5 billion in August from the previous month to $518 billion. Household debt also increased by $5.2 billion last month, inching up again after it surpassed its all-time high of $1 trillion in June. The mounting debt is seen as a result of government measures that ease limits on the amount of money people can borrow from banks when buying a home. The move is part of the expansionary policies by the economic team led by Finance Minister Choi Kyung-han to induce spending and promote corporate activity. The expansionary policies were further fueled by the Bank of Korea when it cut its base rate by 0.25 percentage point last month, ending a 15-month freeze. Critics say the government's policies will actually increase household debt in the longer term and ultimately stifle domestic demand as they encourage households to rack up higher debts. Although the finance minister did not directly comment on whether the central bank should make further cuts to its base rate, Choi has reiterated the importance of coordinated fiscal and monetary policies to boost government efforts to spur economic recovery. To drive his point home, the ministry pointed to lackluster on-quarter growth of 0.6% in the second quarter. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
Instead of going through the hassle of buying a one-way transportation ticket or paying cash for every ride, millions of people in Korea are using a prepaid public transportation card, the Tmoney card. This technology inside these cards is continuously evolving along with its expansion abroad. Kwon So-ah reports.
A tough commute in Southeast Asia. This is just one of the Korea Smart Card Corporation's recent ventures into the global market. The company's prepaid transportation card, the Tmoney card, which launched 10 years ago, is already a staple for millions of commuters in Korea.
When I used to pay for my fees with cash, it was inconvenient, but not anymore since I use the Tmoney card. All I have to do is charge it.
The most convenient part of the Tmoney card is its integration system. Whether you're traveling by subway, bus, or taxi, this one card can get you where you want to go. And it's also selling overseas. Korea Smart Card told Arirang News that Tmoney America was established in New York last month to expand its service in the U.S. The company's first service abroad in Wellington, New Zealand, has been running since 2008.
When cards are held against the Tmoney card reader there, the settlement data is sent to Korea, and those results are transferred back to New Zealand. That's remote management service through cutting-edge technology.
Since it uses NFC technology, a short-range wireless technology, the business opportunities expand beyond the scope of transportation. It makes micropayments at more than 50,000 businesses possible, including convenience stores and vending machines. Korea Smart Card says it's hoping to eventually become the world's #1 smart mobility and payment service provider and is already in talks to expand its service in another location by the end of this year. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Dust is a constant nuisance in our lives, and it may also be taking a toll on our health. Researchers in Korea say the dust on our beds could greatly increase the chances of lung-related illnesses, even more so than smoking. Connie Kim tells us more.
This woman has been living in her apartment for more than 10 years and cleans constantly over concerns of dust.
I tend to cough a lot in dusty places, so I change my bed sheets once every 2 or 3 weeks.
Her concerns are not unwarranted and may be helping to keep her free of lung diseases. New studies conducted by local universities show that the dust in our beds can have serious effects. According to study results, the ultra-fine particles found in beds can increase the risk of asthma up to 10 times. Continued exposure can also raise the risk of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease by up to 8 times. And while smokers have 3 times the risk of getting lung cancer compared to non-smokers, a dusty bedroom raises the risk by up to 40 times.
If there is a continuous exposure to bed dust, airways can be narrowed and destroyed, which can eventually cause lung cancer.
Experts say the best way to reduce the threat is to change your sheets regularly and keep your bedrooms well ventilated by opening the windows from time to time. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Korean dramas and K-pop have made a splash on the global stage. Now, could Korean animations be next? Our Kim Min-ju reports on one wildly popular cartoon that's being made into a smartphone game.
Already beloved by television audiences of all ages, cartoon character Larva has wiggled itself into another media realm, smartphone games.
Distinctive and at the same time funny characters like these will draw people in, eventually providing users with original entertainment.
The users may be as far as Southeast Asia and South America, in countries where the animation is already popular. The creators of the game hope it's just as well received.
Diversifying and expanding into overseas markets, we are trying to reach emerging markets such as Brazil and China.
Korean dramas and Korean pop music have already proven themselves to be popular overseas. The success of Larva and other animations has some wondering whether cartoons may just be the next big thing. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
The final verdict is in. Oscar Pistorius, the South African Paralympic champion, has been found not guilty of premeditated murder of his girlfriend, who was killed at his place last year. With more, Paul E. is joining us from the News Center. Paul, this case has been at the center of international attention for months now. What were some of the key points of the final remarks by the judge?
Well, Judge Toko Masipa of South Africa's High Court is currently reading out the final verdict at this hour. But one of the most significant rulings so far has been that the prosecution failed to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Pistorius had deliberately carried out the killing. Pistorius and his family arrived at the Pretoria High Court on Thursday following 41 days of emotional testimonies. Judge Masipa accused Pistorius of being a very poor witness and even being evasive when under cross-examination. The judge also questioned the reliability of several witnesses and raised concerns of police contaminating the crime scene.
Having regard to the evidence as a whole, this court is of the view that these issues have now paled into significance when one has regard to the rest of the evidence.
The W. amputee had shot dead Riva Steenkamp on Valentine's Day at his home last year, claiming he had thought she was an intruder. Pistorius still faces lesser charges of murder or culpable homicide. We'll bring you more updates on the trial as they come out.
All right, thank you very much. And turning back to the Middle East, Paul, Syrian rebels backed by the terrorist group Al-Qaeda have released a video of a group of UN peacekeepers who were kidnapped in Syria 2 weeks ago. And based on what we see in this video, it looks like the group is willing to release their prisoners pretty soon.
That's right, Cherry. The video, which was posted on Twitter and YouTube by the militant As-Nusra Front on Wednesday, explains that the hostages are safe and will be set free in the coming days. It comes a day after the government of Fiji said the group of 45 UN peacekeepers would be released without any preconditions. The unidentified captives in the video, which was filmed on Tuesday, stressed they had not been harmed in any way and were in good spirits.
We've been informed that we will be released soon, and we are all very happy to be going home. By the way, we are all safe and alive, and we thank Jabhat al-Nusra for keeping us safe and keeping us alive.
The group was seized when the Islamic rebel fighters turned on the UN peacekeeping force that had been patrolling a ceasefire along Syria's Golan Heights last month. More than 70 UN troops from the Philippines were able to escape to safety after being pinned down for 2 days in the mountainous region.
And turning now to the stars, 3 astronauts have returned back home after completing a 6-month mission aboard the International Space Station. And this was a joint mission with the United States and Russia. And although their relations their relations have hit a new low recently, I guess they did better up in the space, right?
That's right. American astronaut Stephen Swanson said the crew on the ISS put aside all earthly politics and that he's confident in leaving Russian commander Max Suryev in charge of the space station. Swanson, along with 2 Russian cosmonauts, safely landed in Kazakhstan early Thursday after hurtling back to Earth on the Soyuz capsule. NASA said the trio had worked for nearly 170 days in cramped quarters aboard the ISS, conducting cutting-edge research in science and technology.
Welcome to the end of increment 40. We've accomplished a lot. We've had a lot of fun. Hopefully everybody else had a lot of fun too. This was a team effort. We got together. We did it as a team.
The U.S. Space Agency said the results of the research would be used in long-term space travel as it prepares to send 2 astronauts to the orbiting laboratory next year in its eventual manned mission to Mars. NASA said that although it was cutting cooperation with Moscow over the Ukraine crisis, they stressed that current work on the ISS would not be affected.
And finally, Paul, Apple's new latest iPhone is set to launch around the world next week, and it looks like people are already lining up to get their hands on this latest gadget. And give us the latest on where this iPhone mania is taking hold.
Sure thing, Cherry. Well, Apple fans are often known for their passion for the company's popular products, and Japan appears to be the latest country to be hit with the iPhone fever. Tech enthusiasts began setting up camp outside the Tokyo Apple store on Wednesday, just a day after the U.S. tech giant announced its newest smartphone in San Francisco. The iPhone 6 is set to go on sale on September 19th across 9 countries, including Germany, Hong Kong, and Australia. While some Japanese media speculate the crowd in Tokyo had been hired by Apple, many say they're just die-hard fans.
I'm counting down the days left to the iPhone 6 launch on my t-shirt.
The larger screen iPhones, measured at 4.7 and 5.5 inches, will be hitting the Korean market later at the end of next month, according to industry experts. Meanwhile, the smartwatch wars are expected to heat up as Apple prepares to launch its first smart wearable device early next year. The so-called Apple Watch will likely offer tough competition to Samsung Electronics, which released their sixth smartwatch, the Gear S, last month. Charity?
All right, Paul, thank you very much. Good to have you back with us, and we'll see you back here in just about 2 hours. Again, thank you so much. And that wraps up this edition of Arirang News. Thanks for watching.